Welcome to Dr. Creepen's dungeon. Spirits and ghosts occupy a tantalizing space in our imagination, drawing us in with their mysterious allure even as they send shivers down our spines. Their spectral presence challenges our understanding of reality and the afterlife, inviting us to explore the unknown while simultaneously triggering deep-seated fears of what lurks beyond our mortal existence. This duality, where fascination meets terror, fuels our endless curiosity, making every whispered legend or fleeting glimpse a powerful reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, as we shall see in tonight's collection of stories. Now, as ever, before we begin, a word of caution. Tonight's tales may contain strong language as well as descriptions of violence and horrific imagery. That sounds like your kind of thing. And let's begin. Rough night at the Running Bear Casino. The raging river pulled them down. Now they'll always be together in that happy hunting ground. Running Bear by Sonny James. Snake Eyes. New roller, please. Next up. The game runner raked in the dice and chips and ignored the despair in the countenance of the most recent high roller. Ted shook his head, and other people crowded him away from the dice pit. He was almost out of funds, and it was still early. Well, he'd budgeted his loss level carefully to maximize his time at the reservation casino. It was an older one, filled with stereotypical paintings and statues intended to honor the local First Nations tribes while fulfilling the expectations of rude tourists. He looked around forlornly for a new game to play. Well, he didn't care for the slots or the drawn-out and ever-shifting card games. Blackjack. There was an opening at the table. He rushed over before anyone else could snag it and bustled onto the chair. "Okay, deal me in on the next hand," he interrupted the dealer, who ignored him until he was done dealing out the rest of the players and raking in the chips. He still did not speak, but once Ted placed the minimum bet, he flipped a card down in front of him and the game began. Ted immediately started winning the straightforward game. He picked up most of his losses from his unfortunate run at craps and was finally enjoying himself. The couple at the far end of the table had apparently had enough and didn't care for the new player. Ted liked to talk to new people and thought he was good at it. Well, before long, the other players had left, and it was down to him, the dealer, and an older man who wore a black cowboy-style hat and chain-smoked thin cigarillos. Ted, grinning heartily at his latest win, glanced over at the man, who had just fired up his next cancer stick. "Oh, you know, casinos and a few bars are the last public places where anyone smokes. Well, I remember when there were smoking sections at most places. My parents told me there used to be no restrictions. I'll bet you get plenty of pressure to stop from your family and friends. It's a pretty bad habit for your long-term health." Ted usually rambled on past any non-verbal cues that people might give him to stop talking. Yet his diatribe came to a screeching halt at the look with which the stern-faced elder favored him. The older man drew in a long pull on the fire stick, and then exhaled the stinking cloud into Ted's face. He coughed a little and gagged at the odor of the raw blend of tobacco and chemicals. The old one removed the cigarillo from his mouth and tapped ashes onto the edge of the table and down onto the floor at his toes. "Sonny, nobody cares. Nobody wants your opinion, and you're not special, no matter what your mommy told you. I'll do as I please, and if you don't like it, go bother people at another table." Ted gasped in shock. In his mind, the man's words verged on an assault. He looked helplessly at the dealer, who just ducked his head and tried not to laugh. Indignant, he rose, took his pile of chips, and fled into the depths of the gaming house in search of a friendlier table. He didn't find one he liked, so he finally gave up and sat at the bar. The bartender seemed to ignore him in favor of tidying up her workspace. He cleared his throat and received only a glance. He mumbled as much to himself as to her. "I just want a drink while I wait for a table to open." He wondered at her stony silence. Maybe she resents me for being... Well, his vocal ruminations were interrupted by a feminine voice. "What do you want?" Ted looked up to see the bartender, mocking smile in place below shining, mesmerizing eyes. Ted simply gaped and eventually worked his jaw uselessly. The bartender shrugged and walked back to the other end of the bar. She spoke with a large man who was clearly part of the security team, and he glared at Ted while she spoke. Ted wanted to avoid a confrontation. He'd been conditioned that he should seek authorities if such a situation loomed. Yet casino security was the only available authority here locally. There were tribal police on the reservation, but he wasn't sure they'd want to listen to him. He finally shrugged and decided to go back over to the hotel for the rest of the night. This trip had been very unsatisfying, like all those he'd taken since he moved away from his parents' home a few years previously. There was an indoor walkway to the hotel, but Ted decided to go by the outdoor route to get some fresh air and enjoy the natural beauty that the builders had incorporated into the facility. As he walked dejectedly down the sidewalk, local flora pressing in from each side, he heard, from the nearby forest, a screeching wail. It startled him, and he had to stop a moment to catch his breath and wait for his heart rate to slow to something more manageable. Well, he realized it must have been an owl or some other night bird. His father had told him that there were always weird noises out in the sticks. As he plunged his hands into his pockets and determined to go to his room for rest, he caught the faint smell of burning tobacco on the breeze. It wafted over his shoulder from behind and caused him to emit a feeble cough. He looked back in annoyance. In the shadows behind him, he saw a figure. It was dark and stood in a way that made him uncomfortable. An orange glowing circle of embers hovered around the face and rendered just enough light to illuminate the blue-grey curls of smoke as they exited the tiny conflagration and rose above the brim of a black hat. The ember flared for a moment and then flashed to the ground and was snuffed by a shadowed foot. It wasn't exactly clear to Ted. The figure's lower extremities were blurred. An even brighter flare from a light or a match stabbed into Ted's eyes as the smoker lit his next cigarillo. Ted glared with irritation, but felt uncomfortable at the unnatural stillness with which the figure returned once the new fire was lit. He coughed once more, this time deliberately in a passive-aggressive attempt to communicate his displeasure, and resumed his walk. He strained to listen behind him to determine whether the figure followed. He truly wished to get away from the stink and the threat of cancer or other respiratory illnesses. He slowed to listen, then gave up and looked over his shoulder again. There was no figure in the dark back near the exit to the casino. He turned to resume his walk, but a smoky black form now loomed before him. Its eyes glowed and smoked like large twin cigars as it gaped a maw that emitted pure black smoke and glowed with blue flames within the deep tunnel of the throat. Ted's consciousness fled his body and found itself in a burning nightmare landscape that extended for as far as he could perceive in all directions. Darnell, known to his public as Murder Bush, a deliberate mistranslation of Merde Bouche, a.k.a. Deadly Rapper, for having been a suspect in a shooting back in his youth, stepped up to the dice pit as the geeky dude left. He had plenty of chips and cash to back them. His entourage was there to support him and kiss his backside as often as he wished. He rolled through 6 passes before he crapped out. Well, he hadn't overbet, so he'd won a small amount. He picked up his latest winning chips and handed them to the hostess, who had kept them well plied with drinks and snacks. He was sure that, for the right price, she would take care of his other needs. He played a few card tables and finished with roulette. Each time he won a few chips, he passed them on to the young woman or to one of his flunkies. In the end, they'd all received at least some reward for the praises they'd heaped upon him. Not for any real accomplishments, but rather to curry favor with the man whom they considered to be wealthy and important, a celebrity. The girl stayed at his side, and except for when he asked her questions, she said nothing. He liked that. Bitch knew her place. He revelled in internal satisfaction. He liked her looks, too. She was medium height and a little thick. She was clearly interested, but hadn't gotten in his way when he flirted with other women. He truly liked this one. The more he considered her, the more he wanted to get down to business. Eventually, he posed the question to her. How much for the next few hours? His brazen suggestion that she would take money for sexual favors was the final test. If she grew angry, then she didn't appreciate his genius. Whatever you think is fair. How about we see if I can satisfy you? If I can, you maybe want to be generous, as you have been so far. She hefted the chips so that the pieces clinked in her palm. If not, I don't deserve a reward. She had passed with flying colors. I might even take this one back to civilization with me, he purred in his mind. He'd always thought of himself as a big cat, maybe a leopard or jaguar, definitely something dangerous and sleek. His need grew more intense by the moment. He desperately wanted this woman. Come on, let's go to my room, he husked in a voice grown thick with desire. They reached his suite, his groupies having been dismissed to their own nefarious pursuits, even his bodyguards. The big man had shrugged. Your call, boss man, and then stomped across the hallway to his own room. Now he was finally alone with her. He stripped off his shirt and flipped his shoes into a corner. She stood by the window and watched. The drinks he'd consumed finally caught up with him before he'd shucked his pants and drawers. Hold on, I'll be right back. He was excited, which made urinating a challenge, but it had to be done so that he could maximize his pleasure. When he stepped from the restroom, au naturel, he saw that his latest conquest had done the same and now stood, bare to the world and staring out the window, all the curtains on it pushed to one side, so that the night loomed and the light of a single small desk lamp lit the room. He stalked over to her, ready to take her there at the window in full view of anyone who looked up from the outside. He secretly hoped for an audience. He enjoyed having others watch him take what he wanted. She turned to face him, her head lowered. No, it had sunken into her body. Only her hair remained above her shoulders. A mouth, gaping and slavering, opened on her stomach. A mouth too large for her body and rimmed with rows of teeth like sharpened spikes. She stepped forward to embrace him, and the screaming began. Sounds that he was accustomed to eliciting from others, rather than emitting from his own person. Rhino was unhappy. He didn't like to leave Darnell unattended. Perhaps now that his boss was in the room, he could go stand guard outside the door. He took care of some personal ablutions as he wolfed down a couple of energy bars and then walked out into the hallway. He started to settle in front of Darnell's door when he heard a muffled scream and faint, slobbering, gobbling noises coming from the other side. He quickly tried the door, initially too panicked to think of the extra keycard with which Darnell had entrusted him. He fumbled for it and soon had the door open. The interior was completely dark. The light from the hallway spilled inward, but didn't seem to reach as far into the room as it should. He drew his pistol from the holster on his waistband and began to stalk forward. Boss, you okay? You hurt? The room was as silent as a tomb. He shivered a little as that thought crossed his mind. Over by the closed drapes, he smelled something awful. Fresh blood and spilled entrails. Recent death. His feet squelched on wet carpet. He turned around quickly. There had been no noise, but he felt, a presence. And there she stood, arms spread wide, mouth on her gut spread wider. Rhino wasn't one to scream or yell. even in extremis, so no others would come to this room to investigate. Shelley was glad when the rowdy group left the roulette wheel that sat behind her favourite row of slots. The former one-armed bandits that were now multiple-button digital bandits lined every available wall space, and in some spaces stood in rows that drew regulars like dung-heap draws flies. She grabbed her favourite machine early in the evening and sat sliding in dollar bills and working up her points. It was called Buffalo Dance, and featured images of American bison and feather-bedecked hunters. The theme on the screen matched, and she hoped to one day see the white buffalo image adorn the entire set of images, the grand prize view. Despite the fun graphics, it was her favourite because it was near a restroom and a free soda and snack bar. She found herself ahead and on a roll. She absently lipped her dangling cigarette back into her mouth for a long draw. The smoke obscured the screen for a moment, and then she noted a shadow that lengthened across the reflective surface. Somebody stood close behind her, someone who exuded a chilly air. She paused and looked around. "Can I help you?" There was no answer, though the shadow shifted slightly as if its caster had heard her. Now she grew annoyed. "Oh, this is just the sort of thing to break my winning streak," she raged internally. She braced her hands against the machine and worked her buttocks to make the stool on which she perched spin so she could confront her harasser. She gasped and nearly lost her cigarette. There was no one standing near enough to cast a shadow. No one even faced her. She chalked it up to excitement. Maybe someone stepped too close when passing to go to the restroom, she thought, still a little annoyed and chilled. She turned back to her game and continued working the buttons, pumping in bills and winning a little at a time, the points now built well above her investment. "Oh, this weekend is going to pay for the last 2 months of losing and breaking even," she thought triumphantly. The shadow loomed across the screen once more, this time even larger, as though the figure that cast it stood closer. The shape was amorphous, but hinted at anthropomorphic. She shivered as an icy breeze flowed around her, as though the air conditioning had sent out a short, cold burst, a minor malfunction. She turned around with more alacrity and determination than the last time. Mouth agape, cigarette once more dangling, precipitously and endangering the cleavage she displayed, already baked and wrinkled from years of sunbathing. The frigid air passed, and no one stood anywhere near her, though a customer approached, headed for either snacks or relief. "Excuse me, sir. Did you just see someone, maybe a large man, standing behind me?" Well, the man paused and looked at her in confusion. He had clearly been absorbed in his own thoughts. What? No, I wasn't really paying attention, but no." He bustled on toward the free fountain drinks machine. Shelley shrugged. "I can't give up now. The pot's even bigger." She checked her points. She was nearing her all-time high. The winnings would pay her space rental fee at the RV park for the entire month. She pressed and played the buttons more fervently than ever, determined to break the bank on straight points or to reach that magical spin that would offer an instant reward of $10,000. She set her new points record and reveled for a moment. She reached for the now small stack of dollar bills, the rest having been devoured by the machine. She fed in the entire remaining amount, then once more gazed at the screen. It was now entirely blackened by a looming shadow. The temperature of the air around her plummeted, and she shuddered with a sudden biting cold. The cigarette was long extinguished, and she'd let it fall into the ashtray built onto the side of the machine opposite the drink holder. She was cold, and she wanted to cry out for help. But the darkness closed in around her as the shadow enveloped her and cut off her breathing. Her fingers, paused above the spin button, struck, and as her consciousness faded, she saw the flashing blue light and heard the blare of the winner's siren. White buffalo images filled all 9 spaces. "I won! The grand prize! Tonight's podcast is sponsored by Murderology, your deep dive into the chilling world of serial killers, true crime, and much, much more. This channel offers a 101 level exploration into the minds, methods, and motivations of some of history's most infamous predators. Perfect for true crime enthusiasts, each episode unpacks the basics, who they were, what they did, and the psychological factors behind their actions. Focusing on clarity and storytelling, Murderology provides a compelling and accessible entry point into the dark corridors of criminal psychology. Subscribe and uncover the stories behind the headlines, if you dare. Just go to youtube.com/Murderology. That's youtube.com/Murderology. Terry filled his large cup and stood sipping and daydreaming. He'd lost everything he'd budgeted to lose, yet he knew that one more try would put him back in black for this trip. He mused about what he would do with the prize money. Well, he'd set his limit of $300 and had quickly lost it all on the slots. Maybe he could risk just a few more dollars, skip a lunch or two until his next paycheck if it didn't work. Well, he was startled by the jackpot winner's flashing light and the siren that went off just behind him. "Yeah, that bitch," he yelled internally. "Yeah, figures. Some old used-up skank would win the big prize." He looked over at the nearby machine with anger and envy vying for control of his senses. Oh, she was gone. He stepped over to the machine and looked around in confusion. Maybe she'd gone to the restroom. No, she'd have passed right by me. He shook his head and stepped up to look at the screen. He could still feel the recent presence of a player, the trace of warmth from a human body that might linger in a space for just a moment after the human had vacated the spot. He looked around the casino floor. She was nowhere in sight. She'd been wearing a low-cut silver-spangled top that was cut way too low for her sagging, sun-ravaged bosom. She should be easy to spy. She looked like a deflated disco ball that had fallen from the ceiling to play slots. The only thing that came his way was a train of employees, led by a waitress in a skimpy outfit with purple sparkles and carrying a tray with a glass and a dark bottle. She was followed by other employees who formed a sort of conga line. They sang a congratulatory chorus as they approached. Well, Terry was surprised for a moment when he realized that they thought he was the big winner. Well, he'd have to deny it, of course. Surely the woman would be back at any moment to claim her prize. The floor cameras would have recorded who'd sat at the machine. But it was too late. The group of enthused employees encircled him, and the attractive young waitress poured him a glass of champagne and snuggled up to him. The manager approached and seized his hand for a vigorous shake. "Well done, sir. I see that not only have you hit the jackpot, but you've raised an additional 3,000 in points. A fabulous prize, and well played, I'm sure." Terry was flabbergasted. He'd never won anything like this. "Well, I still haven't. Not really," he reminded himself. He rarely broke even on his gambling forays, whether to the casino or the corner store for lottery tickets and video slots. He allowed himself to be swept up in the reverie and was led from the machine to the bar. The employees peeled away as they approached, and he soon found himself with only the bottle and a receipt that he could cash out before he left the premises. A sullen-looking woman stood behind the bar, wiping glasses, and a large, mean-looking security staffer menaced the far end. He already had his bottle, so he wasn't sure why the staff members had deposited him with these two killjoys. He shrugged, picked up the champagne, and started to walk away from the bar. "Well, you can't take that with you. Either drink it here or give it to me and I'll put it in the trash," the bartender stated in monotone. The security officer stood up straight from where he'd been leaning against the far wall, apparently propping up the building. He folded his massive arms in a threatening manner. "Oh, silly," thought Terry. "Folded arms should be a hindrance, but I get the feeling he's dangerous regardless." He'd figured that he'd had enough anyway and set the nearly empty bottle on the bar. "You can keep it, ma'am. I can afford another at the hotel." Terry started to walk away from the bar, but a huge ham-like hand seized his shoulder. Sausage-sized fingers applied painful pressure. You apologize to the lady." The wet heat from her mouth placed uncomfortably close to his ear, and breath smelling of river bottom sent a shiver of disgust through his body. The voice was as low and deep as the river that ran past the back side of the property. Terry decided on the better part of valor, and head facing forward to avoid the obscene orifice, said, "Sorry, ma'am, I meant no offense." The fingers let go and a harsh laugh sounded from behind the bar. "You don't even know why he's apologizing, fool. He ain't worth the trouble. Let him go." Terry felt a slight shove, and he was sent on his way to the cash-out window. There he met with the lead cashier, an old woman in drab clothing. "I'm sorry, sir, we give out only these prepaid cards. We can't provide cash over $1,000. However, you can treat them like a debit or credit card," the cashier informed him. Well, it seemed he had no choice, so he accepted. Well, 13 grand is 13 grand, he assured himself. He was elated, though he continued to glance around nervously, waiting for the woman in the sparkly fish-scale top to accost him and name him a thief. Yet she was nowhere to be seen. The floor was full of players, some laughing, some intense, some dejected or mesmerized by the games of chance in which they'd lost themselves. Well, he thought about what to do with the rest of his evening. He didn't have a hotel room. He planned to sleep in his station wagon, as he always did before the long haul home. Perhaps he should get a room. Maybe they'd take him without a reservation. He giggled a little at the unintended pun. A reservation at the reservation. He shook his head to clear his overreaction to the silly internal joke. He decided that maybe someone on staff could help him. He approached the major domo at the front entrance that led to the interior walkway and the hotel beyond. "Excuse me, sir. Do you know whether the hotel will accept a resident without a prior reservation?" The man, single dark braid wrapped in a leather holder and draped over one shoulder, looked at him gravely. "Yes, I know." He said nothing more and did not smile as though he'd intended to be humorous. Terry tried again. "Will you tell me, please?" The man flicked his chin in the direction of the hotel. "See the clerk at the desk." "Jerk. You think I hadn't pissed away enough cash in this place over the past few years?" Terry muttered as he stumped toward the hotel, ensuring that he was well beyond earshot before he actually spoke. His head had begun to buzz a little from the champagne. "Took a while for it to affect me," he mused. The hallway appeared to narrow, and his peripheral vision grew grey. He felt dizzy as he entered the main lobby, the large room beginning to spin. His last view was of the sky-blue ceiling decorated with a few puffy clouds as it faded into darkness like the sun had set. He awakened to the sounds of voices chattering happily. He looked around, his vision blurred slightly and his head feeling heavy and sore. He soon found that he could not move his arms or legs. They were bound. He was strapped to a table. He saw numerous bodies moving about in the mostly dark space in which he found himself. "Please," he croaked, throat dry and feeling scraped. "Please, help me. Let me loose. Loosen me." His perceptions cleared slowly, and he saw that the bodies that moved around him, now chanting rhythmically rather than babble chattering, were emaciated. The owners showed as much bone through their skin as would a dead thing, long decayed. He noticed spikes above a few heads. No, antlers. The rest wore masks of various beasts. No, the skulls of those creatures still filled with glistening fangs. Their dance grew ever more frantic, more energetic than they should be capable of performing. Then one of them reached out with a stick, on the end of which was a small claw, taken and preserved from some dead animal. It used the claw to gouge out a scoop of flesh from Terry's side. He screamed in torment and horror. His screams soon matched the rhythm of the chanting, and they went on for a long time before they at last faded when he'd lost too much blood to remain conscious. Hussein nudged his brother Iqbal and aimed his chin toward the bar. Look, a fat, stupid American has finally managed some success. Iqbal smirked. It's the only way the infidels can succeed. They have no education and no skills to do anything useful. They don't even worship their god anymore, only money and fame. They will soon learn better. The brothers were out enjoying a night of revelry, with a few more planned when they reached the city. The celebrations were at last a reward before they fulfilled their mission and achieved true paradise through martyrdom. Hussein was superstitious and hoped to find success at gambling before they took the great risk that, if successful, would help to sustain their cause. They had grown up in this land of debauchery and foolishness, but had been taught from the first to honor their own beliefs and culture above anything the Americans professed. Hussein was on roll number 5 of what he intended to be a short run. He wished to win 5 times for the 5 pillars of Islam, the name of his cell in the latest great jihad. He blew on the dice and tossed. The small cubes bounced against the back side of the pit and tumbled end over end as he watched breathlessly. "Another 10, the barker called, and pushed the winnings toward Hussein. He placed a minimum bet and rolled once more. He had already left the table before the barker called, "Snake eyes, next roller please." He held up his chips triumphantly. "Iqbal, more money from roll number 5. I kept the bet in place for 5 rolls. I left only the minimum for the last roll. It is a sign. We are fated to succeed. We will meet the others tomorrow, go over the plan, and then have a last few nights to revel in this world." Iqbal patted his brother on the shoulder. "There is something I would like more than winning chips." He nodded toward the bar and the attractive and sinuous young local who worked behind it, steadily polishing glasses. Hussein watched for a moment, unsure whether his brother meant the alcoholic drinks that had been forbidden until now, or the woman. Knowing Iqbal, he assumed both. "As you wish, brother. Take your mortal enjoyments while you can. She looks a little sullen, though. Frown. Lowered brows. I like the happy ones." Iqbal's serpent-like smile widened. "She will look better when I have freed her from the miseries of the uncircumcised. She will enjoy a real man. Who knows, maybe I will convert her so that we can meet again in paradise." And with that, he surged away from his brother and slithered up to the bar opposite the young First Nations maid. "Good evening. I noticed that you do not have many customers at the bar. It seems odd that so beautiful a creature as yourself would not attract more company." The woman ignored him, intently focused on her task. He tried again. "Perhaps I must order a drink to remain at the bar. If so, a gin and tonic, if you please." She continued to polish the glasses. He leaned forward. "Did you hear me?" he inquired in an annoyed tone. "Perhaps you have no business because you are surly and unhelpful." She looked at him and delivered a smirk that appeared to be far more evil than anything he could ever hope to muster, despite his thin, reptilian lips and predatory mind. "We don't want customers to linger at the bar, getting drunk and building from misery to anger over their losses. And we want them playing and losing." She leaned toward him and glared into his own eyes that he normally considered flinty and daunting. "You know about losing, don't you?" Hussein noted that the large man at the end of the bar in the security shirt had begun stomping toward them. "Iqbal, perhaps it is time to go look for other entertainment." Iqbal ignored him. He was trapped in the serpent's gaze, like a mouse dropped into a snake's tank, only to be devoured while its owner watched with perverse interest. Hussein reached for his brother to tug at his arm, but never got the chance. The big security officer seized his hand, drew it to his too-wide chest, and turned. The weight of the man drew him away from his brother and caused him to spin around, so that he ended up facing the goon with his brother beyond the man and in the clutches of the serpent woman. The ham-fisted gargantuan continued to twist the hand he gripped until the pressure caused Hussein severe pain. He grunted and bent into the angle of his wrist to relieve the distress. He found himself bent forward and looking up desperately toward the man's face. The security staffer smiled, his square, blunt teeth showing dark behind an almost lipless mouth. His wide back and chest, covered in body armor under his shirt, made him appear like a monster-sized turtle. Hussein felt himself lifted and placed behind the bar. His brother soon slithered over the top and fell to the floor beside him, smiling beatifically. Hussein opened his mouth to scream for help, but a large, blunt fist crashed into the side of his head and he saw stars. 7 of them, like the holy... The fist descended once more, and then he saw only darkness. Father Danilo Bayani was immensely enjoying his latest trip to the continental USA. He'd visited Hawaii many years ago, and New York City more recently, but this was his first tour of the grand land-bound spaces that his country offered. He'd managed to roam so far from his origins in Manila. Now, in his twilight years, he longed to see what he could of God's green earth, all on the payroll of the Vatican while they cleansed the records of those hateful allegations. The bitter thoughts raced across his mind. Well, of course he was a sinner. He was only mortal. He'd been expiated of those sins and had paid an enormous price to continue serving in his capacity as a parish priest. He forced his mind to return to the moment and more enjoyable pursuits. He noted the hirsute and similar-appearing pair of men who had gone to the bar and wondered why the security officer approached them, but his attention was called once more to the round of Texas Hold'em and his table mates. When he again had a moment to look, no one was at the bar, in front or behind. Curious, he thought, but he quickly refocused his attention on the fascinating new game he was in the process of learning. He was familiar with poker, so it wasn't difficult to learn. He liked the high level of interaction that this version of the game allowed. He'd done well, certainly gained enough to fund extracurricular activities during the rest of his current sabbatical. He'd been disturbed by the overall atmosphere of this place when he'd arrived. He didn't care for the numerous paintings and sculptures of ancient native deities and spirits. They seemed to be mostly images of the dark beings of various tribal cultures. He loved to study diverse cultures, but this place was an amalgamation of them, built for mutual support by several tribes in the region. Much of the artwork was schlocky and clearly intended to cater to the garish and sordid tastes of the vapid gambling set. Some part of him didn't feel welcome, as though he'd intruded on some private place, set aside for other gods. He shook off the depressing musings. There are no other gods, he reassured himself. He soon stepped away from the table to take care of personal needs and to decide what he should do with the rest of his night. Perhaps he would visit the White Dove restaurant and ballroom on the other side of the hotel lobby from the casino. It boasted a good reputation according to online reviews, even though it was a simple buffet style with a dance floor to one side. He liked the name. It was peaceful, he decided. He soon had a selection of food piled onto a plate and was seated near the dance floor. The place was sparsely occupied, so his hopes of being able to watch dancers as he ate were dashed. Still, the food was good enough. A little bland, but that was necessary in a place that acted as a crossroads of cultures. There was a spice table at the end of the primary row of entrees. He'd helped himself, yet nothing seemed to attach to his taste buds. The combination of eating nearly alone, having no one with energy around him, and the tasteless food soon had him growing restless. He finished up his repast and left the table to go out to the final section of the complex he hadn't visited, the river overlook. As he passed the table nearest the entrance, he saw a stout man in a rumpled sport coat, who glared daggers at him, eyes focused on his crucifix, the only outward sign of his profession. The man appeared to be so hostile that he paused for a moment to determine whether he'd done anything to offend the fellow. "Excuse me, sir. Have I offended you in some way?" The man looked startled. He was apparently unused to being confronted about his demeanor or behavior. He scowled. "Don't like that thing you have around your neck. You Catholics are all hellbound. No concept of righteousness. Not that you'd understand. You people don't even read the book. You listen to your priests and pope and disregard the word. All the kneeling and ritual prayers in the world won't save you in the end. Go back to your idols and beads and leave me alone to seek heaven." Father Bayani was startled by the vehemence with which the man spoke. He hadn't been attacked directly for his faith in years. "Sir, I'm not sure what religion you practice, but I am a man of God, a consecrated priest of the Holy Church. I assure you that I understand more than most, if not as much as I would like. I meant no harm and wish you a peaceful night." With that, he started to walk past the man, but the man rose from his table and pointed his finger. "Your Pope is the Antichrist, and your church is a place of Satan. Look to the Bible for your salvation before it's too late." Father Baiani increased his pace and continued on his journey to the river overlook. He would need the peace and tranquility that nature and the sound of flowing water would provide to settle his roiling mind. Pastor Bill resumed his seat and shook his head. "That fool doesn't know that he's risking his soul caught in damnation. He'd had a bad run at the tables over at the casino. His denomination frowned on games of chance, but he'd needed the money. One of his congregation had come up pregnant, and they had to get it resolved before the 3-month deadline for abortions. He knew that if his wife found out about Carmen, then she'd divorce him. He was here to break every major rule that he professed to hold dear each week. His plan for quick money had failed, so he'd visited the bar. Now he hoped that eating would guide him back to sobriety. He had to think of another plan. Seeing that priest had annoyed him. Had he not been inebriated, he would never have said what he did, nor stared so rudely in the first place. Yet he wanted someone on whom to vent the anger he felt, that arose from fear, and, he'd always disliked the papists. If his wife divorced him, if the scandal involving the woman who cleaned the church all week and then occupied the back pew every Sunday ever broke, he'd lose his ministry, his livelihood. His degree in theology would be worthless. He might be able to get a job teaching at some secular school, but most would not hire fervent Christians like himself. He stared dejectedly at his plate of food that had contained more spice and flavors than he liked. A shadow passed in his periphery. It was low-slung and blurred just a bit as it loped along the wall. He thought he heard an odd laugh, somewhere between human and canine. Maybe a little like a hyena might sound, or so he imagined. There was a manic quality to the laughter. A jest that was on him so that only the other entity knew what it was. It was the wicked laughter of children at play, who decided to target a fat kid with glasses. A kid whose parents had been abusive addicts, but who later got right through religious-based recovery programs. Their faith had led him to his own, but he'd never really lost those early traumas of being unaccepted by his peers and being beaten by people who later professed faith above all. A mocking whine, definitely doggish, his now sobering consciousness informed him. Something was making fun of him, teasing him from the shadows. He looked around for staff members or other customers, but found himself alone. The dining area and the dance floor were deserted. It was odd. There was almost always someone at the buffet service tables. He looked over to the kitchen doors in hopes that one of the employees would burst through with a fresh serving of chicken wings or whatever tray had been emptied. He saw dark figures move past the cloudy round windows on the swinging doors and temporarily occlude the bright kitchen lights within. But they were indistinct blobs and appeared to be focused on tasks of their own choosing rather than service of his needs. He stood and realized that he was more intoxicated than he'd thought. He immediately resumed his seat and bent forward to regain his balance and bearings, and to swallow his rising gorge. When he sat up again, a dark, shaggy form perched in the chair across from him. The figure was no more than a silhouette, a raggedly hewn shadow. Yet there were eyes. Sinister golden gleams appeared and blinked at him. He heard a heavy, panting sort of breathing, and a gust of foul-smelling carnivore breath assaulted his olfactory senses. What are you doing at my table?" he asked in a mushy, confused manner, still fighting off waves of nausea. But his impression was that the being smiled at him, a gaping, lolling smile with a tongue dangling out to one side and sharp canines gleaming. "I thought I'd check on you, my righteous friend. You seem to be upset, unhappy. You nipped and barked at that other person who shares your faith. I thought perhaps there was a deeper concern preying on your conscience." And Pastor Bill had tried to force himself to think through what this person had said to him. Likely some hippy-dippy weirdo. "That guy's a Catholic priest. We're nowhere near the same religion." Once more he heard the chortling laughter that was now very clear. "I'm sure you think it's different. Those of his specific religion came to these lands many years ago. They were the first of you Christians to arrive. The rest have been simple variations on a theme. The problems began when your co-religionists assumed that only your God exists, and all of the local gods and spirits were instead demons and dark powers. Instead of trying to show that yours is a better way, you Christians insisted that yours is the only way. You've forgotten that in ancient times people held true to deities who were attached to local communities or to the land and features around them, geographically and ethnically relevant. You have gone from subsuming and incorporating older gods as angels and saints to demonizing them, and now in your hubris to denying them altogether." He shook his head. Too bad, really. It creates an adversarial relationship." He chuckled at some joke that Pastor Bill was still too drunk to comprehend. Pastor Bill had grown increasingly fearful as the voice intoned its philosophies. He wanted to refute that voice, to deny its very existence. Yet he feared its wrath more than anything he'd ever feared, even the fires of hell. Instead of making a stand and arguing his faith, he staggered to his feet and ran, stumbled blindly toward the kitchen and the pale, ghostly figures within. Surely someone within would save him. The sardonic laughter chortled after him and chased him into the two bright lights, descending into the yips and yowls of Coyote, even as the door swung shut behind him. He looked around at the glowing white figures who halted in their various progresses to stare at him. Their eyes. There were none, just empty sockets, faces slack with gaping lamprey maws. He heard a new sound as they swarmed him, his own forlorn screams of ultimate agony. Father Baiani stood out on the river overlook platform and enjoyed the solitude that had so recently left him restless. There were plenty of noises out across the flowing torrent. The water itself as it passed over hidden objects, fish as they leapt from its embrace to kiss the night air, frogs and insects, and the warbling, mournful sounds of a loon, and the soft sigh of the wind as it passed through the verdant landscape. This is much more peaceful than the white dove, he thought. He had some trouble shaking off ruminations on the verbal assault from the strange, possibly drunken man in the restaurant. He decided that he'd pray for the man, that he would one day soon find the true faith. Sometimes that was all one could do for the short-sighted. He heard a deep, coughing hiss out in the dark. He was startled, but quickly realized that it was an American alligator, cousin to the creatures he'd observed in many places around the planet. He was truly content, at one with nature in all her glory, in all the natural splendor of creation, he immediately corrected himself. A sound impinged on his senses as it slowly rose and obscured the others. It was a lapping sound at first, more like ocean waves on a beach than the banks of a river. Waves at cross purposes to the flow of the river slapped at the base of the platform. Soon the sounds evolved into splashes, as if something very large was approaching the river overlook platform. He leaned over the rail to have a closer look. Perhaps it was a large water creature or a boat. Maybe a gator, as the locals call the big reptiles. He peered down at the dim, rippling surface below. At first he was unable to discern anything but small reflections on the water as it swirled and lapped. Then, from below the surface, he spotted an eye, a much too large eye. It glowed from within the sickly luminescence akin to that produced by deep-growing fungi. As he stared in horror, he saw a mouth gape below the eye, an enormous frog-like opening with no teeth but serrated lips, like some monstrous catfish. As he stared, too much in shock to act, he suddenly felt his body wrapped in strong, leprous flesh, and he quickly lost his ability to breathe. The last sight he saw before he plunged over the safety rail was the thin, grey, first light of dawn. Chief Harry Whitehorse gazed around at his fellow chiefs and shamans from the various local tribes. So, are the Dark Ones satisfied once again? Have they sated their appetites on strangers so that our peoples will be safe for another year? Affirmative rumbles muttered around the conference room. Red Wolf, a shaman, spoke from near the back row. They are not only satisfied, but Coyote assures us that their prey people will not be linked with our premises or other business operations. Most of the fresh mutters sounded pleased, but old Harry had to ask, can we trust him? Chortling laughter sounded throughout the conference room and ascended into thunderous yips and howls of hysterical glee. Be wary of the bustling markets of Cup Mendou. So, when did all of this start? Well, I recall eating supper downstairs at the Bean's Cantina when I began to feel this strange sense of discomfort. From there on, something was definitely wrong with me. If I remember correctly, I was sitting in that empty old rustic hall where I gobbled on a bowl of delicious pangolin soup and munched on a cut of generous grass bread. When, suddenly, a sense of vulnerability and shame began growing in me. Evidently, quenching my hunger did not appease this horrible sensation. I was beginning to feel as if I had no clothes, as if I was naked and repulsive to everyone around me. Yet, I can confirm, of course, I was dressed. Then and there I was wearing my trademark sea blue wool tailcoat and my favorite iron chain belt around my comfortable brown linen pants. I will also mention my footwear. 2 vermilion-pointed leather poulain shoes, one purple, the other one green. Well, obviously I had more style than any other guest. Nonetheless, that sense of dread and vulnerability struck me even more when the cantina was beginning to get crowded. The cozy ambience of the hall, with its fireplace and calm instrumental music, it all did nothing to appease me. The more the guests found seats on the few tables available, the more I was suffering from growing anxiety and shame. I was even starting to feel paranoia as more and more guests started entering the cantina to take refuge from the upcoming storm by means of dark hot cocoa and spicy purple wine. At that moment, it was like my subconscious knew something terrible that was hidden in plain sight, something that I did not yet fully realize and the onlookers eventually would. I had somehow spontaneously developed a fear of the public, all because my latent senses wanted to hide something compromising at all costs. Back at the robust, triangle-shaped wooden table and rough tree-bark chair, the strange feeling was beginning to take a physical toll on me. I was sweating profusely and about to have a horrible migraine when I preemptively left the charmful cantina. If I remember correctly, I left a tip. Obviously, leaving the table, I seemed normal to all the guests. No one batted an eye, since no one had a reason to. It's here in my room that I, fortunately and strangely, found immediately respite in the solitude it provided. Here, between these 4 walls, that horrible dread vanished on the spot. Immediately, from that incident at the cantina, I started to ponder on the nature of my newly developed condition and the timing of my first episode there. I've just realized something rather bizarre. Yes, deep within my most primitive instincts, I have a strong hunch. I definitely have, because yesterday I lost something that's unnatural to lose, and if people would notice, it would only be with terrible consequences for my integrity. And that's why I feel like some kind of monster in the company of onlookers. Still, I must quickly realize what it is, since the condition seems to constantly grow and will eventually lead to the deterioration of my life as an alchemist. Well, I can't afford it, not after all the hard work I've put in and all the sacrifices I've made. I can't and I won't give up on my claim to the title of Master Alchemist. Just today I came to the realization that I can't spend time in public. Somehow it's now impossible for me to stroll through the wet market or visit any shop, cafe or library. I'm more uncomfortable in the company of people than a cat in cold water, and so now I am constrained to my budget room. Also, it seems that I can only feel confident in going outside when no one is looking or is around to notice. I feel the most comfortable during the night hours, but even then, when people are around, I must walk through poorly lit alleys and dark passages to fully feel, somehow, safe from their gaze. Indeed, I have developed an irrational fear and a bizarre condition. But why, and most importantly, how? How did all of this happen to me? Well, the answer has to lie in the last 3 days I spent at Cup Mendou. Since it's here where this affliction struck me. What is it? A jinx from that witch? My ex? A curse from my rival, Hassim al-Hassar? Or have I died and I don't yet realize I'm a ghost? Whatever, I have to find out. If I write down all the latest events, I may delve deeper, more specifically into the darkest pits of my memory, and then make up a most detailed roadmap featuring all of the latest events and specificities. And this is how I hope to discover when and where this problem took root. Oh, just for a start, I suppose, it has to be related to my dealings in the dark arts, most precisely to my stay at Cup Mendou, the epicenter of the supernatural trade of this corner of the world. It's in my chamber's intimacy under a weak yellow light bulb that I'm writing this recollection. Also, I am aware of the need to delve into my motivations and shady dealings to have a better chance to remember my mistakes or bad luck. I am fully aware that what afflicts me can't be unrelated to the mysterious, bizarre, and clandestine environment that I rubbed shoulders with during the last few days. It's the most logical premise to start this inner investigation. I arrived at Cup Mendou 3 days ago. If I'm not mistaken, the ship in which I travelled all the way from Darwin was named the Silver Colossus. It sailed under some Micronesian flag, and of course it had nothing to do with its glorious name. The ship was actually a rusty small fishing boat, plagued with carcasses of dead squids and the stench of rotten mollusks. I will confirm the crew was matching the setting. All the 12 fishermen aboard were all locals of the surrounding islands, and their antipathy was as striking as their uncommon features. They had thick necks, no lips, big, wide black eyes. Some of them even had webbed hands. Their captain, Thargo, was the only one that spoke English, yet it was incredibly difficult to understand his broken dialect. The only thing I recall understanding was that they all sailed north in search of potential wives. I also remember asking him how he prefers them, women. He replied with his unusual deep and guttural voice, "Fertile." Then all the crew croaked in unison, rather insidiously. Indeed, it was a long and tiring 2 weeks of maritime voyage. Nonetheless, I'd made it here safe, and above all for a low price. Yet I'm quite disappointed they didn't invite me to the upcoming weddings. We were starting to get along. Anyways, I arrived in the early morning. I was in good physical and, most importantly, mental health, albeit very tired. So quickly I checked in at the nearest budget inn. Because I travelled lightly with only my leather shoulder bag as luggage, I didn't even need to unpack. Instead, I just took a rigorous shower and later bestowed my clothes to be meticulously washed. I gave the clear instruction to the maid that all had to be thoroughly cleaned and dried. It all had to be cleansed from the horrible, rotten fish stench. After a long, hot shower, I took a longer siesta until the late evening and early night. As you know, the Cup Mendou market actually only really opened at sunset, and I had to be mentally rested to haggle for the best quality and price for the various items I came to procure. So after a 10-hour sleep, I woke up from a bizarre dream, just before the appearance of Venus in the night sky. Now, curiously, the presence of that particular planet allows the execution of certain forbidden rituals and consolidates dark pacts and potions. Well, too bad I didn't have my alchemic gear in hand. I could have advanced my magnum opus. Anyways, I got up off my bed and immediately noticed my clean clothes deposited on the dark wooden chair just beside the entrance door. I quickly fetched them to smell lavender with delicate notes of fish. Oh, I really don't know what I expected. I dressed up, grabbed my shoulder bag and exited my room, and then the inn. The atmosphere of the port was calm that moonless evening. The waters were tranquil and dark, and they reflected the many lights of the market and, more softly, the luminosity of the brightest constellations in the night sky. Yet the winds were delicate and fresh, and so it fueled my appetite. At that time I started to become really, really hungry, especially after not eating all day. So my first stop at the Cup Mendou market had to be at Baba Yaga's pretzel shop. That evening the market was tight-packed with people. Strange and stranger individuals roamed the many alleys, where numerous small shops offered the miscellaneous to bizarre items and services. Either way, I crossed paths with many interesting locations that I would later visit. But before that I had to eat something to reinvigorate my body. And this is how I ended up at Baba Yaga's pretzel shop, an artisanal pretzel shop where the original is the stuff of legends. And I asked for exactly that, the Baba Yaga's pretzel. It cost me $5, yet it was fully worth it. The way that veiled woman prepared it in front of the many curious onlookers above all was mastery and art. Using special ingredients and bizarre artifacts, the old woman was chanting rhythmic hymns while making and shaping the pretzel when, fully formed, blue flames engulfed it. She quickly submerged the burning pretzel in a pool of dark sauce. Then she carefully extracted the dark, shiny pretzel loop before sprinkling sea salt on it. The former was handed to me inside a folded newspaper page. Baba Yaga's original was more than just delicious. It was an otherworldly culinary experience. The dark, salty and crusty shell of the pretzel was hard and above all crunchy. Yet the inside was soft and chewy, filled with a special blend of melted goat cheese and local herbs. It was, indeed, an unforgettable meal. Every bite was a mix of yummy chewiness and the delicious cheese and hard crunchiness from the stiff, thick, burnt shell. Of course, I had to wash it down with some of the local homemade root beer. Indeed, really refreshing and invigorating stuff. After consuming the pretzel of a lifetime, I departed happily in the direction of the lesser-known Black Cat Bookshop, an old and antiquated bookstore, where it's still possible, even nowadays, to find ultra-rare specimens of forbidden or thought-lost grimoires. Indeed, this medieval underground bookstore is impressively vast, and it's filled to the brim with uncategorized tomes and books. Unfortunately, I was not there to stroll between the thousands of shelves in the hopes of finding some hidden gem like some of the people down here, but rather to procure myself a copy of The Book of Shadows, a study into the hypothetical abyssal alchemy by Ra-Hopotep, a rather common tome. Nonetheless, I was in need of the rare Coptic version, for it is in the original language that the message is most precise and clear. The store owner, Amibus, did indeed have 2 copies of the book, yet he was stern on the price of 20 ounces of silver, a strain on my budget. Luckily, I managed to negotiate the price down to 14 ounces and a love potion of my creation. He reluctantly accepted, but, believe me, at that age, he will need it more than silver. After the transaction, I continued the special shopping in this vast, bustling market. There are very few places a man of my talents can find the rare substances needed to accomplish wonders or aberrations. One of those strange and less-known places is this open market with its concealed magical shops and underground hidden complexes. A market where only the initiated can find items, ingredients, books, and many other remarkable things. Well, if they know where to look. Anyways, until then, everything was normal and I felt great. So after acquiring the dark and small yet thick copy of the Book of Shadows, I made my way to the weird ingredients of Dr. Paul's, another secret shop only known by us, adepts of the occult. The shop is a special apothecary, one where we can replenish some of the necessary ingredients needed for different rituals and potions. Dr. Paul's is especially renowned for having items that should not exist. Ingredients like dragon scales, unicorn horns, mandrake roots, magical beans, and more that can only be found at the weird ingredients of Dr. Paul's. Consequently, I deviated from the main market road to explore a particular protruding dark alley. At the end of that dark and sinister corridor, a single green lamp was softly lit. I walked slowly in its direction. I finally discovered, under the green lamp, a dead-shut wooden door. I knocked on the wood 5 times and, after some time, it opened vertically in a tenebrous entrance. I entered without any hesitation. There I pushed another door, this one outwards. The inside of the weird ingredients of Dr. Paul's was like any normal grocery store, yet what was found on the shelves was anything but normal. I didn't even grab a shopping basket, since I was there only for a small bottle of blue mercury, 3 grams of fairy bone dust, and 2 portable 1-liter Freedom tanks. Well, my heart almost stopped when I looked at the prices. Over 500 ounces of silver for everything, and the shop didn't even accept gold certificates. So I had to settle for a half-full bottle of blue mercury, 3 grams of fairy bone dust, and only 1 liter of cylinder filled with Freedom. All that for a certificate of 400 ounces of silver. I still can't believe I paid that price. It had tripled in cost since my last visit. If I'd only known before investing in gold that 3 more Philosopher's Stones would be minted in secret, well, I'm now stuck with more than 500 kilos of that precious metal. Yet all the tradespeople are afraid of accepting it. Who can blame them? No one knows how much of it will be issued until the illegal stones are confiscated, voided, and the transgressor or transgressors executed. How did someone even manage to mint a Philosopher's Stone? The Higher Council has more than once assured it was impossible, nowadays at least, to mint 1, never mind 3. Well, the Council did also say that the value of gold is safe and backed by a supreme magical pact. Well, now we see how that all turned out. Now that I remember, back in the day, my good friend Andros told me something about gold being basically worthless, that I should invest in lead. I should have listened, really should have. Well, back to the unwinding of my night. After exiting the alchemical shop, I felt normal. Indeed, nothing was wrong with me at the time. I still had hopes of acquiring all of the ingredients for what I'd come here for. Thus I continued my journey through the market optimistic, unaware of what would eventually await me. It was almost midnight, and I still had to make one last stop when a rather strange thing happened. Yes, on my way to the Dark Emporium, after opening and entering inside the first manhole I came by, I noticed the gaze of a strange figure upon me. Indeed, it was when I was about to close the steel entrance above me that I noticed the silhouette of a mysterious man, observing me from within the darkness of an obscure alley. He was thin and quite tall, having broad shoulders and wearing a hat. He was smoking what appeared to be a pipe. It lit in that intense orange-yellowish light. Only the chamber of a tobacco pipe can emanate deep within the gloom. Then I paid it no mind, but now I think it might have been a clue. Anyways, I jumped into the bottom of the sewers, closing the manhole above me. I landed on a narrow paving. It was just beside and perfectly just above a gargantuan and fast-moving river of grey water. The air was humid and the atmosphere murky. I was afraid of taking the wrong step and falling into the rapids, then being dragged into God knows where. So naturally, I was in a hurry to find the small bottle of limelight I kept inside my shoulder bag. I'd found it when something touched the tip of my right foot. Well, right away I stepped with strength on what I felt like a humanoid hand. Then I grabbed from my right pocket a small cube of Andromeda and dropped it inside the transparent flask of limelight. Instantly, an intense purple light illuminated the ancient sewer, and I saw a horrid, aquatic creature disappearing into the unknown depths of that grey water. I really don't know what I'd expected. I shook the small flask for quite some time, then it illuminated the direction of the nearest wall. A glowing green arrow and some words of the same neon color were beginning to appear on the stone. The message was clear. This is the way, and the arrow pointed at it, to the dark emporium. Walking through the extensive subterranean complex was especially sinister. The tunnels and corridors blended and diverged sporadically. Some were small and modern, others colossal and more ancient than the city itself. Some even descended to unknown and unexplored abysses, depths I would rather never test. The way was long and tiring, yet my flask of limelight lit strenuously the way forward, revealing clear instructions under its then trembling purple light. Theoretically, I only had to follow the signs appearing regularly through my path to arrive safely at the destination. Yet in practice, things got spooky and dangerous rather quickly. Just half an hour into my journey, the once aggressive waters calmed down, all at once, leaving behind a vacuum of uncomfortable silence and black, impenetrable waters. Nonetheless, the aphonic ambience was quickly filled up with the sound of my footsteps and some other brisk marching noises. I stood still for what seemed like an eternity, to better understand the alarming occurrence, and it also stopped. I am fortunate that the sewer rats of Cup Mendou did not finish by catching up with me. I swear they are sometimes as big as alpha bulls and kidnap humans to be later to fuel their dark magic. It is said that their king is in a dark communion with an eldritch god, and so he must do his sinister biddings. In exchange for terrible powers, the Rat King has to offer life in front of a hideous altar, deep within the entrails of this city. Well, of course, it's all a legend, but the disappearances are true and a common occurrence here at Cup Mendou. Fortunately, I arrived in one piece to the infamous Dark Emporium. In that place were found truly forbidden artifacts and ingredients that are set for auction to the highest bidder. Down there, one can mostly find souls, spirits, and instinct spices, but banned books, forbidden maps, and much more are from time to time presented to bid on. I descended the helicoidal stone stairs into the main hall, where the bidding for souls was about to take place. It was quite a large room covered in green velvet and featured long wooden benches and a silver podium for the auctioneer, a black ethereal humanoid being with long arms and fingers. Took place in one of the first rows. Well, of course, I was expecting to secure a human soul. Any soul would do. Didn't really care about the rating. If it was from a low-life, good. From a homeless person, better. I just needed one, at least to attempt at crystallizing what would be, if successful, my greatest potion. I was really excited, yet the place was full of adepts of the occult and institutional investors. As is custom, the bidding started with the lesser souls, people who did not achieve their potential and succumb to the pressures of this world. The pale auctioneer presented a weak, sickly flame to everyone, while the soul of a once alcoholic was contained inside an improvised support, a rusty pickle jar. I was about to bid when I heard him set the asking price, 500 kilos of lead for a sub-prime soul. It was around 2 a.m. when I entered the nearest saloon. I was heartbroken after watching my great future fade away in front of my eyes, not having the resources to chase it, to complete what had taken me decades to research, years to prepare, and seconds to fade away. It was a dreadful feeling. Indeed, without a human soul, I could never finish my grand potion and lay claim to the title of Master Alchemist. So I was drinking the cheapest whiskey inside a smoker's saloon when I was unexpectedly approached by quite an African gentleman. Well dressed and with a dark skin tone, he sat beside me, looked at me, and ordered my drink. Then he stared into his half-empty glass before taking a big sip. So, you two. It is really impossible to acquire a soul in this market. I might as well give up on voodoo and start selling hot dogs on the beach. It's much less demanding, and you don't risk your life. Well, I was startled by the approach, but agreed with him. Yes, it is difficult. But how can you give up on something that you've been working on your life to achieve? I feel like it's really difficult. I tried to take a sip of my own, but my glass was empty. I'm sorry, man. I did not know your art was your life. Me, I only do voodoo recreationally, so I can't imagine what you're going through. By the way, my name is Marcos Matos." He shook my hand. "I'm a voodoo man, novice magician, and I animate birthday parties on weekends. Here's my card." He literally gave me a card. The Jack of Hearts. Well, Marcos was a really peculiar individual. He had several golden teeth and exposed chicken bones in his dreadlocks. Yet he was wearing a quite flamboyant outfit. A yellow and green suit with bronze snake patterns on the blazer. If it makes you feel better, destiny works in mysterious ways, so if you are to get a soul, you will one day get one. Yet how you get it is a whole other story. Look at me. Before all of this, I was living in the UK. I was born and raised there, but one day I decided to have my vacations at the sunny Caribbean beaches. But on my way to Bermuda, the plane unexpectedly had to do an emergency landing in Haiti. And the rest is history." He said, smiling, and then he ordered another drink for me and himself. The guy had had quite an interesting life. His stories were rich in adventure and intrigue. Around 3 a.m. we exited the bar, heading to the market for a last pretzel, when something unusual happened to us. We were already talking about going on a trip together to the Vatican City in search of cheaper souls, when a strange individual approached us. "Excuse me, gentlemen, did one of you drop this?" He showed us a black leather portfolio. Well, Marcos and I each denied ownership of the latter when the guy opened it to look at the contents. He exposed many colorful and peculiar pages, soul contracts to be claimed at the Dark Emporium. Marcus and I looked at each other and smiled. Destiny really did work in mysterious ways. Marcus then said decisively, "Well, having a closer look, yes, it is ours. We couldn't see it that well in the dark, so excuse me." Marcus was about to grab the portfolio when the tour guide quickly hid it behind his back and said, "Gentlemen, I know it is not yours, nor is it mine, but this quantity of souls is quite large. It probably belongs to someone shady. I say we return this to the authorities." Well, the tall man was indeed initiated in the dark arts. He knew what he was talking about, since he knew the importance and the look of soul contracts. That said, Marcos did not relent. "How would we even know you actually grew a conscience and you will actually return it to the owner, now that you know the value inside the portfolio?" "Well, at least I did not lie about my claim to it. I am a man of principles," the man responded angrily, like as if his honor was hurt. I wanted to propose that we should split the contracts in equal parts, but I didn't want to look bad in front of my new acquaintance. After some deliberation, Marcus looked to me and said, "Look, this is a large sum of souls. If someone had lost it, you would already have reported it. Yet we just met, so it is normal to believe that if we leave you to return it, you might just keep the souls and leave us with nothing. So I propose that someone goes to the authorities to see if someone really has lost it. If no one has reported it and everything is okay, then we split it into 3 parts, no questions asked." Immediately I agreed with him. Well, the tall man seemed reluctant at first, but he nodded. He had a severe look accentuated by his pointed goatee and was dressed in an all-black robe that somehow matched his green fedora. "So, who will go?" "I will go," said Marcos. He was about to part from us when he stopped and asked, "And, how do I know you'll not split it in 2 and leave me like a fool? No disrespect intended, friend, but I really just met you a couple of hours ago." I understood his concerns, but the tall man immediately proposed a solution. "Well, it so happens I am an archmage, and I have a solution for all of us. It is to form a magical pact." He dipped his left index inside a large purple mixture. Then he drew an ancient rune on the palm of his right hand. A strange and old rune. Nonetheless, I swear I'd seen this somewhere before lately. "We can agree on this to secure all of our interests. I will inquire to find out if someone truly has lost this portfolio. I will even let you keep the portfolio if you agree to a handshake as a guarantee. So if you run away with the souls, I at least will be able to track you down and carry out justice upon you." I was about to say no, but Marcus, with excitement, agreed for both of us, and I reconsidered my stance. Indeed, I needed souls, yet one should never agree blindly into a pact. "Fair enough." We agreed, me and Marcus, and we shook the tall man's hand. He had the both of us repeat an unknown to me until then spell, and that was it. The tall man tipped his fedora and departed. Half an hour later, just when Marcos and I were starting to worry, he reappeared, with a living black goat trailing behind him, and a happy grin on his face. Since he'd probably bought the goat at the wet market, he obviously had good news to share. "I have talked to the authorities. They say no one has, yet, reported a lost object matching the characteristics of the portfolio. So, if in 3 days' time no one passes by with a valid claim, it is to us to dispose of the findings. Of course, I did not mention what the portfolio contained, but if anyone passes by asking for a leather portfolio, we will be notified." I was excited. Marcus was about to jump with happiness. Yet there was one last problem. Of course, now we stand before the conundrum of who will keep guard of the souls till then. It is why I have devised an instrument that will help us ensure that the keeper will be faithful to his task. He then put forward the peaceful black goat. It was staring at me with curiosity, and then bleated. "The one that keeps the portfolio must keep an insurance ritual. Of course it can't be me because I am the guarantor of the ritual." Insurance rituals. It was the first time I'd heard of those. I was about to ask when the tall man took out a hidden dagger and handed it to Marcos. "No way. I don't feel good about killing animals. I'm vegan. Come on, friend, you should be the one keeping it safe. I trust you more than this random dude. You should have the portfolio, but you must give us some reassurance, some collateral, so we can sleep with a peace of mind." Well, it wasn't the first time I'd sacrificed an animal. Yet a black goat was something else entirely, and offering this specific is usually reserved for some pretty messed up stuff. I was reluctant, but then Marcos pressured me. He told me to hurry before someone noticed. Indeed, the sun was about to rise, and people might see 3 weird men with a black goat. Rightfully, the residents might call the police. It was a risky and difficult decision to make with no time. Nevertheless, I needed those souls. The tall man seemed trustworthy, and Marcos Matos was my friend. Finally, I did it. It was easier than I thought. After all, I am an experienced alchemist and a pretty good cook. Immediately I was handed the closed portfolio, and we all agreed to meet at the Lost Saloon, where there we would split the souls, if no one declared a similar lost item. Afterwards I walked alone in the direction of my inn. It was early in the morning when I hid the portfolio under my bed, and I took a shower to wash the blood off my body. Subsequently I slept until the late evening. When I woke up, I still couldn't believe what had happened last night. Immediately I checked under the bed to see if the portfolio was in the right place, and indeed it was. It was all real. I wasn't dreaming, and somehow fate had smiled upon me. I truly had the universe conspire in my favor. I might have a great destiny to accomplish after all. Nonetheless, later that evening, at the B Inn's cantina, was the beginning of what seems to be my decadence, when after eating a delicious pangolin soup, my psyche started to irreversibly degenerate, when a feeling of unending dread invaded my senses and shattered my character. So that sums up my journey through Cup Mendou. Yet I don't see where it could have gone wrong. Everything went according to plan, hell, even better than expected. Nonetheless, now I find myself cornered, a prisoner of some subconscious fear. Fear of what? I don't know, but I'm scared of people. I experience a dread when they stare in my direction, when they look at me with curiosity. How bizarre. The light is... No. It can't be possible. Wait, I've just grasped what's wrong. How stupid of me to realize it just now. The fact that I have no shadow. No wonder I was all this time subconsciously scared of company. My subconscious knew I was missing something serious and that I was in danger. No wonder I felt safe under the cover of obscurity, when no light could betray my abnormality, where I could conceal the aberration of my presence from the average onlooker. If someone had noticed, I'd be suffering the consequences of being the living proof of an untamable reality. It would be the Holy Inquisition all over again. Now that I have become a sight that breaks all of their preconceived ideas of nature and reality, well, I am now in danger. As soon as they find out, I will have to be disposed of. It's no coincidence that we adepts of the occult hide our art, practices, and power from the overwhelming fear and jealousy of the mob. Salem was just one of the many examples of how extraordinary people are torn down by mindless societies and profane priests, since people destroy what they can't tame or understand. Oh, good thing my instincts are still sharp, and I was guided to the safety of my quiet room. Too bad it's impossible to regrow a shadow. One must wear only their own. Nevertheless, because human shadows are used to fuel some dark summoning rituals, they are a precious commodity for the initiated. Of course, like for the souls, not all shadows are created the same. But how did I lose mine? I'll have to ask Marcus if he noticed something wrong with me. Also, the tall man should know how to... Oh, God. Now that I think about it, I swear that he was the same tall man, the one following me since the weird ingredients of Dr. Paul's. It was him smoking that tobacco pipe, and he made me perform the bizarre magical ritual to secure our agreement on the portfolio. Wait. I have to check something. I just opened it. The souls are not there. Instead, I found a stack of large Jack of Hearts cardboard cards. Oh, Marcus was in on it too, and I thought we could have become good friends. God, I just got conned like a novice. They both lured me into an unknown ritual, so I would willingly transfer my shadow. They probably took it the moment I sacrificed that goat. I really don't know what I expected. Oh, the convenient souls, the strange rune, the spell and that black goat. They played on my desperation and greed to steal my dreams away. However, they made one big mistake. They stole from the alchemist, and he'll get back his shadow. And when he does, he will claim it with interest. Those poor souls. They're about to experience the extreme extent of my glorious powers and intellect. And through my revenge I will have no pity, nor will I relent. I will part today. No need to pack. I'll get those poor devils and reclaim what is rightfully mine. Golden eyes. This is my resolve, my greatest mistake, and something which will haunt my memories till the day I die. Very few people will ever experience what I'm about to describe, and even less will survive to recall it. But the National Park of Springpine is haunted by some creature, a monster you'd only hear about in fairy tales or conjure up in nightmares. But rather than ramble on about how little sleep I'm getting, or how paranoid my brain has decayed, I'm going to write all my experiences down so that someone, anyone, who is next to take the night shift will be prepared. My name is Robin, and I was 19 when I was hired to be a night shift guard at Springpine National Park. I graduated school and found a college which I was accepted into after many sleepless nights and studying. My parents were worried I wouldn't have enough income since they couldn't send me off with too much, so they suggested I took a job near my college that I could do and which wouldn't clash with my college timetable. Well, I'd taken many morning and afternoon classes and studied in the evenings, which meant I had to look for night shift jobs. I wasn't entirely thrilled to be working anywhere so late into the night, but the pay was good and the job was in a team. At least I wouldn't be alone. Well, the job was to monitor the security cameras which bordered the tall barbed fences around the area and report any hunter trying to sneak in. It looked good and gave me decent time to sleep after the shift before my classes started. Not to mention I didn't have to do much, so I could squeeze some extra studying on uneventful nights. I signed up and sent my resume before doing some research into the national park itself. It contained many rare species of elk, deer, birds, and a huge list of flora. Unless protected, hunters and lumberjacks would hunt and chop down the wildlife for their high value, which is why the security was so important. I checked any police records to see if any hunters were caught sneaking into Spring Pine. Only a couple in the past 10 years. As much as this rested any worries I had, something had caught my eye. Anomaly reports. Some campers had been caught, screaming and begging to be let out deep in the night. Well, the national park allowed campers to stay nights. However, due to the decreased amount of rangers and gate checks at night, all gates were closed until the morning. Something about keeping hunters, camping, and smuggling animals out at night. The screaming campers would claim to see something in the woods. However, due to the inconsistent descriptions from witness to witness, the government couldn't connect any of them, and therefore no action was taken. Some described a beast which looked like a 10-foot-tall bear. Others claimed it was a pale, sprinting humanoid. Anyone who entered the park would be informed to leave before 7 p.m, since this was when the gates closed before being reopened at 6 a.m. My shift would start at 12 a.m. and end at 5:50 a.m. I wasn't expected to open or close the gates, but rather just keep an eye on the borders till the bigger security crew took over. What was even better for me was that if I did expect someone was trying to sneak in or out, I wouldn't even have to leave my security office. I'd have to radio to the only security ranger, and my job would be done. Well, I rested easy for a month before I got my call back. Both very happy and shocked, I was accepted. Turned out the group applying was very short and weren't as well qualified as me. Well, not entirely sure what that meant. Perhaps it was because I was fluent in English? Not sure. So, when I came for the tour visit, I was accompanied by another college girl. She was about my age, but a little shorter. We were introduced. She greeted me as Harley with a tip of her cap. She was naturally tanned and looked to be quite athletic. She wore army boots, black jeans, a mossy green sports shirt, and a plaid jacket tied around her waist. Her personality was friendly, loud, and daring. Honestly, she was an all-round outdoors adventure girl. We became friends quickly. The park ranger took us for a day-long walk around Spring Pine, making sure to stop at every gate at the north fence, where the main gate was and where Harley was supposed to be guarding. He gave her the main security card, which could only open a small door through her office, right next to the main gate. The park ranger instructed her on correct procedures if someone tried to get in or out and who to call. I didn't listen too much since it didn't concern me. Instead, I looked into the forest. The trees were large and close together, only distanced at rivers, fields, walking paths, and a large lake in the center. There weren't as many bushes, and the forest floor was covered in grass, moss, and occasional fern patches. The distant singing of birds and river flow was relaxing, paired with footsteps on gravel, making the hike incredibly pleasant and enjoyable. I hadn't seen as many animals, but I'd spot birds and the occasional squirrel in the trees. No 10-foot-tall bears or pale humanoids. Wonderful. After Harley's instructions were given, we were led to the security cabin. It wasn't big, only a storage room, bathroom, and camera room. He gave me instructions on what to do if I saw anyone trying to climb the fence, was injured, or radioed for help. He gave me a keycard which would open the side door into Harley's station in case of emergencies. All employees were required to wear an armband with the Spring Pine logo, so after a tour of the cabin, we were given the armbands and timetables. Harley and I exchanged numbers, and we parted. Our job would start in a week. My first shift was mostly uneventful. I'd arrived with a backpack of snacks, an animal book for local wildlife, and a notepad, in case there was anything important I had to remember. I was wearing a plain striped shirt, a hoodie, jeans, trekking boots, and my employee armband. Waiting by the front gate at 11:46 p.m., I was checking my phone to see Harley was on her way. The forest was quiet, and I saw some late evening rangers leaving. They didn't say much, but were polite. At around 11:54, a young adult joined me in waiting at the front gate. He introduced himself. "Hey there, you're the new security guard, right?" Taken aback slightly from the sudden introduction, I put my phone in my pocket and spoke. "Oh, yeah, my name's Robin. I'm supposed to be in the cabin not too far from here," I responded, while also noticing he had a ranger armband. "Yeah, I know. I'm supposed to escort you there before heading to the watchtower. My name's Andrew." He was slightly taller than me. His brown hair was noticeably messy, but he looked well-mannered. He looked a couple of years older than me, and that night he wore a navy blue jacket, white shirt, dark grey jeans, and trekking boots. "So, nervous?" He was friendly, but spoke quietly, unlike Harley. Why should I be?" I asked, curiously. "I'm not scared of the dark." Which was true. I usually wouldn't be paranoid if I couldn't see. I tended to be rational, and knew there was nothing to be scared of. Some campers get spooked when they stay at night." He shrugged. "Yeah, I read about that. Isn't it usually just wolves or bears that frighten them?" "Well, you could think of it like that. I had to deal with them once. This couple. They were practically begging to be let out. They even left everything behind just to run to the gate. They weren't injured apart from a couple of scratches, but they claimed they saw some ghost creature crawling on all fours. Heavy emphasis on its eyes. Something about gold. Well, not sure. Rambled like crazies." As he was telling the story, I looked into the woods. Could there really be something like that out there? "Oh, don't worry, though. We checked the campsite in the morning, and nothing was stolen or broken. Probably some snowy owl got the better of them." His voice was calm and collected. "Right, well, I wouldn't worry about that. I mean, we'll be in the buildings anyway." Still, the thought hung in my head. I quickly forgot it with the arrival of the only other member of the night crew, though. "Making friends without me?" Harley arrived, wearing similar clothes from last time, just a different shirt and her armband. Harley and Andrew became friends quickly, and the final park ranger escorted the security guard from the cabin. He handed me the only key for the building and left. We waved Harley goodbye as Andrew walked me to the cabin. It wasn't too far into the wood. We walked at a brisk pace so as not to keep the building empty for too long. It took us around 10 minutes. I could no longer see the lights from the gate anymore as we approached the cabin. "Well, just use the handheld radios to talk to us. I won't take long to reach the watchtower, but I'll have my radio with me." I unlocked the door, and before stepping inside, I waved him goodbye. We exchanged polite smiles, and he disappeared into the darkness, holding his torch and carrying his bag. The night passed quietly and uneventfully. I locked the cabin when I got in and checked that everything was in order and place. I signed the attendance list and waited by the cameras, radioing once in a while to check on the others. It was just the three of us in the great expanse of wilderness. Once in a while I'd spot a fox or deer wander a little close to the fence. All I had to do if they got too close was activate the buzzer near the camera to scare the animal off. It did the trick every time, but aside from that I spent most of the evening doodling on the notepad, eating snacks and noodles, the cabin had a boiler, and checking my phone. Nothing was out of the ordinary. Though I got quite tired near the end, I was able to stay awake through the whole shift. At 5:48, Andrew arrived at my cabin and escorted me to the front gate. We all had a friendly exchange as the morning shift employees arrived. I added Andrew's number, and we were on our way home. And the week passed like this. Everything was fine. Why couldn't it stay that way? By this time, I was taking some textbooks and notebooks with me. Since the nights were so uneventful, I decided I might as well make use of the time and study. Harley had the same idea, but instead brought her portable gaming console and played it for practically the whole shift, since she didn't have to monitor anything, and she responded to my radio checks. Andrew didn't have much to do but survey the woods from the tower once in a while and answer my radio checks. He was still in college and also used the time to study. We'd become familiar with each other and would text during the daytime. Harley was a biology student and Andrew was a physics student. All of us were just here because of the convenience in timetables and easy requirements. the night was going smoothly, until something caught my attention. Near the fence to the southwest of the park, I spotted a deer. It looked fully grown. I activated the buzzer and looked back at my notes. It was about 20 seconds later that I looked up and noticed the deer hadn't moved. I looked a little closer at it. It was now that some odd details came to my attention. Looking closer, I noticed its antlers looked slightly twisted and its eyes reflected a gold instead of the usual white the camera would pick up from deer. Thinking this deer must have been too curious, I buzzed again. It didn't move. I radioed to the others. This usually didn't happen. "Hey, guys." "Yes, Robin." Andrew didn't take long to respond. "What's up?" Harley connected after a short while. "Sorry, you caught me at a bad time. Hard level." I rolled my eyes before continuing. "I've got a deer at the southwest that won't respond to the buzzer." Probably just dumb." Harley brushed it aside like she did with most of her problems. "Well, could be old. I wouldn't worry about it. It'll leave after a while." "Well, that was logical. Thanks, Andrew." Right. Yeah, it's probably old. That's why its horns are crooked." I spoke once again before radioing off. I waited and watched to see what the deer would do. Its eyes were still reflecting that eerie gold hue. Could this have been what those campers saw? I'd admit the gold did seem unnatural. After about 20 minutes, the deer turned and disappeared into the woods without the need of a buzzer. Andrew was right. It must have been old because the way it moved looked like it had a slight limp. After that, the night continued as usual. Andrew and I studied while Harley reached the next few levels of her game. The sun rose and Andrew was right on time in walking me out. He inquired about the deer and I told him what I'd seen, and he agreed with my conclusion. Nothing of interest happened for the next few weeks. However, during one night shift, Andrew radioed in at 3:42 a.m. "Robin, I thought we agreed you'd stop using the buzzer if the animal didn't move after the third buzz." His voice was confused but not annoyed. For as long as I'd known him, he'd been a very patient guy. "Yeah, I did agree to that," I replied, probably sounding even more confused. "Why?" I waited for a response. Now I'd put my pen down and close my notebook. Well, then why do I hear the buzzer going off for the 9th time? My mind practically tripped over itself. I hadn't activated any buzzer this shift. I looked back at the monitors. Could they be motion detecting? No, they'd never been like that. I couldn't see anything either, just empty woodland. I picked up the radio. "Yeah, I'm not activating any buzzer. Are you sure you're hearing one?" I checked if there was anything on the controls. Nothing. Why was it going off? Was the system broken? No one had informed me of it. I opened the manual and had a recheck of how the buzzers work. "Yeah, I'm sure I can hear it. It's relatively loud," he spoke back, a tone of concern. "Is something broken?" I skimmed through and found that if the buzzers were being overused, they'd automatically be disconnected after the 20th buzz. Well, it makes sense. There'd be no use for activating the buzzer so many times in a row. I laid the manual on my desk and replied. Maybe, how many times has it gone off?" Since there was a system for disabling on such occasions, I assumed it wasn't as uncommon as I thought. But my logical thoughts were suddenly shattered once his reply returned. "About 26 times now. Close to 30 for sure." My mind was in a flurry. I reread the manual. What's going on? Oh, that's impossible. It's supposed to be disabled after the 20th buzz. Do you know where it's coming from? I was concerned now. This didn't make sense. I flipped through the manual. There wasn't anything I could find as I waited for his response. It feels like the far north fence. That's odd." He trailed off. "What's going on?" Harley joined in, probably noticing the sudden activity of the radio. Oh, Andrew hears the buzzer going off, though. I'm not activating it. It should have stopped by now, but for some reason it keeps on going. I was still waiting for Andrew's reply. Sounds closer than where I think the gate should be, he continued. What? Harley questioned. I was too deep in thought, trying to piece it together. As I waited to hear more, I took out my notepad and jotted it down. Andrew hears the buzzers going off near the watchtower, 3:44 a.m. I'm not sure. It just sounds closer than I think it should. He carried the same tone of tension as I did. Well, maybe the system malfunctioned. I wouldn't worry about it. Harley, in contrast, was much more laid back. We can check it in the morning. There was an empty silence. I wondered if I, too, could hear the buzzer going off. So I got up and walked to the storage room, since it was the only room with a window, and cracked it open. The lock was a little rusty, but with enough effort it gave way. I opened it enough to stick my head through and listened intently. Sure enough, far in the distance, I could hear the faintest alarm. If I hadn't known it was the buzzer, I would have assumed it was a car alarm. I looked around. The lights from the storage room were just enough to illuminate a few feet ahead of me and cascade onto the trees close by. I didn't see anything but the deep shadows surrounding and expanding beyond. I slipped back in and shut the window, making sure to lock it. I turned off the storage room lights and returned to the security room. Nothing. We all stayed silent for the rest of the night, until Andrew spoke again. Hey, I think it's done. I can't hear it anymore. He still sounded slightly concerned. See, problem solved itself. Probably ran out of batteries or something. I don't know. Harley didn't seem to care all too much, probably still focusing on her game. Let's check again in the morning. I'll report it, I offered. Yeah, okay. Something about the way he said it made me feel like he wasn't completely convinced that would be enough. I checked the cameras for an hour before continuing my studying. Everything Harley was saying made sense, but still something felt off. The morning came. Before leaving to go to our homes and dorms, we all explored the woods between Andrew's watchtower and the gate. The sun was up and illuminated the forest in a natural glow. Birds sang gently as some early joggers passed by. We were all quite tired, but were determined to find the source. After walking for around 20 minutes, we couldn't find anything. Nothing was unnatural or out of the ordinary. We all agreed it must have been a system malfunction and left. And nothing like that occurred again for a few days. I was studying as usual in the security room, once in a while checking the monitors for intruders. Nothing. Time went by, dragging on into the later hours as usual. I checked on the others once in a while. Andrew was also studying while looking out once in a while, making sure to pay close attention to the north of the watchtower. Harley was still focusing on her game. I believe she mentioned getting a new one since the job gave her extra time to finish levels much faster. Suddenly, at 2:23 a.m., I saw on the north gate a camper had run to the fence. He looked terrified and panicked as soon as he saw the fence ahead of him. I instantly dropped my pen and radioed to the others. Guys, there's a camper panicking at the north fence. He doesn't look injured, but he's looking around. I didn't have to wait long for a response from both of them. Can you see any animals? Harley quickly chimed. Is there anyone else? Andrew also inquired. Both sounding serious and shocked. This was the first time Harley and I would encounter scared campers. I waited and looked at the monitor, straining my eyes. He continued to scream. Now, the camera didn't pick up audio, but I could see he was mouthing, "Help me," and something else. And his expression was disturbing. He looked like he'd just seen a nightmare. No, it doesn't look like anyone else is there. Andrew, should you pick him up? These were the instructions given should someone need aid. After a moment, he replied, Yeah, of course. I'm packing some items. I'm going in. Just a sec. He sounded far away from the radio. He was doing something else across the room. "Should I go? I think I'm closer," Harley offered. It was clear her full focus was on the situation and not her game. No, I should go. I'll take him to the front gate, so you should be there. Robin, could you call the emergency number?" I checked a couple of drawers before finding the contact list, my hands a little more clumsy than normal due to the desperation. Something about the look the camper gave was clear he thought his life was on the line. I dialed the emergency number, and the woman on the other end confirmed an ambulance was on the way. I put the phone down, and Andrew radioed in. "Yeah, of course. You're taking the radio with you, right?" I began. Clearly my worried tone was getting through. Yeah, I'm leaving the watchtower now, locking it." He spoke quickly as if he was rushing. I could hear a click and his hurried footsteps down the stairs of the watchtower. "I've got my torch, some pepper spray, a horn, an army knife, and a first aid kit in case this is an animal attack." The footsteps were on gravel now as I heard him running quickly. I checked the monitors again. The camper hadn't moved from his spot but was clearly agitated. He was breathing heavily. At first, I thought he'd calmed down until I noticed he seemed to be looking at something in the trees. I strained closer to see in the monitor. Was there an animal? I looked closer. Was there anything there? And that's when I saw it. 2 golden eyes were illuminated between the trees. I didn't understand. The deer, how could that have scared him? I continued to look at the monitor, my eyes glued as I held the radio in one hand. I couldn't see enough that I could make out the shape of the deer or its crooked antlers, but it was clear the golden eyes shone through the darkness, staring back at the camper. I activated the radio and spoke while still staring at the monitor. "Andrew, I think there's an animal near him." "What? What kind?" I could hear his boots hitting the ground quickly as he was making his way to the north gate. "Have you tried scaring it away with a buzzer?" Wait, that made sense. I was too focused on trying to see the creature, I didn't think to try and scare it away. As quickly as I could identify the button, I activated the buzzer and watched as the man jumped slightly from the sudden sound, and the creature's attention turned to me. Its golden eyes directly oriented to the camera and back to the man, as if it was figuring something out. Suddenly the golden eyes disappeared into the shadows as the man clutched the fence tightly. The sound of the radio nearly made me fall over in my seat. "Robin, what does he look like? I'm near the fence." I shook my head as I thought once again, quickly responding. I'm not sure, but I think it's the deer from earlier. It wasn't scared by the buzzer, but it left. I could only see the golden eyes of it, but that's it. I think the camper's alone. He looks frightened. You shouldn't run at him." Speaking quickly, I made sure to get the point out. "I understand. I'm reaching the north fence. At which camera do you see him?" he continued. I checked the camera. "Camera 4 north," I reported, and then waited, still staring at the screen. The man was frozen in place by fear, and most likely exhaustion. It wasn't long before I could see Andrew. His jacket made it easy to tell it was him. He calmly approached the man and spoke. I couldn't tell what it was, but the man seemed to calm down and stumbled towards him. Andrew offered his shoulder to lean on as they began towards the front gate. I followed them on the monitors while also checking behind them in case something was following them. Andrew kept looking over his shoulder and looking around with his torch. Was he seeing something I wasn't? I continued looking at their surroundings and behind them. Nothing. Maybe Andrew had heard something. After a moment, when Andrew stopped and scanned the woods with his torch, he paused. It looked like he was frozen in place too. Had he spotted something? I almost radioed in, but Andrew spoke first before moving quickly towards the main gate. "Oh my God, Robin, did you see that?" His tone was panicked, and I looked back at the monitors. Whatever he'd seen was outside the field of vision of the camera. "No. What is it? What did you see?" I responded, confused, but with an underlying fear creeping in my voice. It looked like a person, but pale and... No, it couldn't have been. I saw it for just a moment, but there's no way I'm looking back. We're nearly there. I scanned the screens, looking for a pale figure. Where was it? God, he sounded shaken and panicked, so unlike him. I don't see anything. Can you describe it? I was cut off by his voice. God damn it, Robin. Stop, that isn't funny. And his yelling caught me off guard. I'm scared enough as I am. You didn't have to activate the buzzers without a warning. My mind was racing. What? I didn't. I swear I didn't. Are you sure it's the buzzer? Just as I finished the question, I saw something. Very briefly, the camera picked up on someone running through the trees. I thought it was male, but it seemed very tall and its body was twisted and moved unnaturally, like a limb. Before I could see any more, it disappeared into the trees and I lost sight of it. Holy crap, I radioed. Whatever it was, I just saw it. Now I understood the need for Andrew's panic. It moved quickly, but I could see enough to tell I'd be terrified of it. Luckily, Andrew and the camper had reached Harley's office. I sighed and checked the monitors for any sign of the creature. Nothing. Harley and Andrew radioed in to say the camper didn't look badly injured, but his behavior was erratic and paranoid. An ambulance arrived and took him away before our shift was over. What the shit happened back there? I heard Harley speaking over the radio. Her tone was concerned, but also aggressive. Look, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm not the only one who saw it, right? Right? I mean, Robin, you saw. You said you did. He sounded desperate. I wonder if he was sure about what he'd seen. I decided not to lie, though. It'd be logical to make sure that they knew exactly what I'd seen. Yeah, I saw something on the cameras following you. Well, it was difficult to tell, but it looked like a really tall, pale human, but it wasn't human. I mean, I'm sure. It looked all mangled and twisted and limped quickly after you, like it was trying to be human. I wasn't sure what I meant by that last part, but I let my thoughts wander. Something about that thought made me think. Guys, I think we should meet up after our ship and check the woods. I think I've got an idea. It was 5:21 a.m. and near the end of our shift. Wait, so this isn't some crappy prank you're trying to pull? Harley finally spoke again. Well, I know what I saw. I'm not going back to the watchtower after that. I'm staying here. I could hear him pull out a chair and sit down. Harley didn't protest, so they sat there in silence. As they did, I looked around the office, checking for something. Maybe the last guard had left notes, or anything that would give me the answers I wanted. My blood went cold as I heard something outside the cabin. Slow, irregular footsteps approached and began circling around the building. I could barely move as I heard it. I slowly backed away from the door, my steps slow and quiet against the wooden planks. Holding my breath, I turned off my radio. It would cut off my communication, but in this situation I was damn ready to pay it. My lips quivered as I felt it tapping the outer wall of the cabin, making a sound ring through the building. I stepped back and lowered myself to the floor, praying the floorboards wouldn't give out and make a sound. I could feel my eyes welling up from the fear. That thing was right outside the cabin. I was separated only by a wall and empty space. After folding in on myself, I slowly opened the bottom cabinet below the desk. A small space I discovered I could fit in one boring night. It made a creaking sound. Oh, fuck. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I wasted no time in stepping into the empty cabinet and curling in, shutting the door as quickly as I could, but still making a creaking sound. It was complete darkness. Nothing to see but a whole hell of a lot to hear. The creature made a creaking sound, and I could tell it was mimicked by vocal cords. It was repeating sounds. Some dots began to connect in my head as I hid in the cupboard. It continued to creak outside the cabin as I could hear it tapping the edge of the door, following its frame. Tears rolled down my eyes as I begged, "Please, please let me have locked the door. Please, oh please." I heard the door shake slightly. "Please, please, please." The tears dropping from my chin and soaking into my hoodie. The door handle shook before starting to turn, and then a painful click of the handle. The door opened with a dreadful creak. I clutched my knees and prayed. I bit my lip just to keep me from whimpering in fear, and I held my breath. The hand holding the radio began to shake, but I refused to make any sound. I heard bare, uneven footsteps walk into the cabin. It had to be limping. It didn't move much from the center of the room. I breathed in very, very slowly. I didn't dare open my eyes in case it could feel the wind being brushed from my eyelashes. My heart skipped a beat as I heard a sharp, sudden sound. It rung in my head and caused me to tense up harder, my lip finally bleeding from the pressure. I forced myself not to take a sudden breath in fear it would hear me. It was the alarm of the buzzer. I stayed there, hearing its breath, feeling it tapping the wall and repeating that creak. It was trying to draw me out using sounds it had heard. What the hell was this thing? After 10 minutes of pure agony, I could hear it starting to walk out. Its bare feet causing the floorboards to creak under its weight. I may not have been able to see it, but this creature was large. My eyes were blurred from the tears and my lip began to sting since my adrenaline was cooling down now. I could hear the footsteps hit gravel and then disappear outside. Still, I refused to move from my hiding place. What if it was hiding just outside, waiting for me to leave before attacking? I checked my watch. 5:36. I made sure to take a mental note. Even after a long while of silence, I couldn't bring myself to even take a deep breath. Until I heard a knocking from the door. Oh crap, it was back. I held my breath as I felt my heart race again. The door opened and I heard boots on the planks. "What happened? Robin, are you there? Why was the door unlocked?" It was the voice of Andrew, or was it just a mimic voice of Andrew? I reached into my pocket slowly and took out my phone. I texted to him while still remaining silent. He sounded like he was headed to the storage room to look for me. "Is that you?" I texted and waited. "Yes, I'm at the cabin. Where are you?" I finally took a deep breath and burst out of the cabinet. Holy shit, I can't believe I'm still alive. I was shaking from the sudden release of fear. Andrew rushed into the room and looked at me, confused. What happened? Are you okay? Why didn't you respond?" He patted me on the shoulder while spurting out question after question. I slowed down my breathing. Finally, standing up straight and taking my bag, I walked out of the cabin and looked around. "Robin, are you going to tell me what's going on?" Andrew grew slightly irritated but was mostly concerned as he followed me. "You're not going to believe it." I spoke quietly as I looked around, expecting something to look back at me. The sun's early light was piercing through the trees, but I still couldn't see anything beyond the tree line. As we walked to the front gate, I told Andrew everything. Shocked and terrified was the only way I could describe his face. Still, he stayed silent as we continued. I felt as if something was watching us, something just out of sight, something that would disappear the moment you turned to look at it. As I recalled the whole experience, he looked around. Was he feeling watched too? "Do you feel it?" I whispered quietly to Andrew. He turned to me, a paranoid look in his eyes. He nodded quickly and we ran to the front gates. I didn't look back. I didn't need to know that whatever was watching us wasn't following. We reached Harley, slightly out of breath and checking behind us. Once we were sure we were safe, I closed the office door and turned to them. Andrew might have been more understanding of my behavior, but even Harley wasn't questioning how I was acting. We sat down, talking and discussing what we'd seen and encountered. How it could mimic sounds, possibly change the way it looked. It was terrorizing campers and even the guards. Since nothing like this occurred to any other shifts of guards or rangers, we assumed the creature only came out at night. Spending most of the morning and noon talking, we finally came to the conclusion it was trying to mimic a human to draw us out of hiding to either kill or capture us. It leaves no trail behind and disappears by morning. Its only defining feature is that its eyes reflect gold and it limps, most likely because its victims are injured and cannot walk properly, causing the creature to mimic their movement. We agreed that we shouldn't tell any of the other guards about it, since we'd be risking our jobs and we couldn't just pass this burden on to another group of unsuspecting victims. After some more debate about how to go about it, we agreed that over the day we'd formulate our own plan for the creature, meet up tomorrow evening, and do overnight experiments. In the decent break in between my morning classes and afternoon ones, I decided to go shopping for equipment. I didn't have a gun permit, so I knew that wasn't a form of defense I could use. Instead, I bought a bat and a decent camping knife, which I could explain I needed because of my job. I then purchased several wireless outdoor security cameras and a map of the park. Over the day, I noted down the areas I could see with the fence cameras and the places we've seen the creature. I pinpointed spots near the front gate, my cabin, and the watchtower. Arriving to work extra early gave me 2 hours of sunlight left to place the cameras. I did so in trees near the front gate, facing the staircase of the watchtower, outside my main cabin, and a tree near a popular campsite. No one questioned my actions when they saw my armband and assumed it was just for security. Connecting them all to my laptop, I made sure they were working and headed to the front gate, waiting for the sun to set and for the others to arrive. Harley was next to arrive. Her look had lost its friendly charm and was now replaced by someone who wasn't getting enough sleep. She told me her dad's a rural climber and hunter who had a lot of kits she thought were useful. In her bag were knives, a hunting sniper, a small bear trap, rope, an axe, and 2 flare guns. She gave me a flare gun and told me to use it if our communication wasn't working. Andrew arrived next with an electronic device and some kind of gun. He told me not to worry where he got it from and explained it was a tracking device. It acted like an implant he could use with the gun object, and he could track the creature with the device. We felt prepared, but a sense of dread loomed over us as we looked off out into the woods. "Hey, are you guys the night crew?" The question sank into my stomach like stones. Slowly we all turned our heads and looked at the source. She was a short, sweet-looking girl wearing a pink sweater and dark green overalls, her hair up in 2 ponytails. Though she looked young, it was clear to tell she was about my age. We all looked at each other, trying to conceal our panic. "Yeah?" Harley spoke, both quietly and worryingly. She zipped up her bag, concealing the dangerous items inside. I saw the girl's eyes briefly glance at the bag before talking. "Oh, that's great. I'm here to join you. My name's Sophia. My application was accepted a little late, but that's because I only moved in a week ago." Her voice was contrastingly lively and bubbly. It felt like something had gripped my throat as I succumbed to the fact that we would have to deal with her and the creature. "What's wrong?" I opened my mouth to talk, but Andrew spoke next. I could see he'd already put away the tracking device. "Nothing. It's just we weren't expecting anyone new. Which station are you at?" He was trying and failing horribly to ignore the tension in the room. I nearly felt bad for him. "I'm joining someone at the security office to monitor cameras." She began fiddling with her invoice. "Oh, then, that's me. I'm Robin. That's Andrew, and this is Harley." I finally spoke. It wasn't easy since it felt like my throat was closing up. After giving her a radio, we exchanged concealed panic looks. What are we going to do with her? Why of all nights did she arrive now? Should we tell her? Would she believe us? We decided silently to not tell her about anything, and I texted them about it when we were stationed. Sophia followed me like a puppy as Andrew was walking me to the cabin, and she was completely oblivious to the horrible feeling in the air. She was slightly behind us, her torch spinning around as her arms swung merrily at her sides. This caused the shadows to twist and turn unnaturally, deepening the pit in my stomach. Andrew and I looked at each other, and he whispered quietly, "You're going to deal with her, right?" He spoke under his breath. Even in the silence of the woods, I felt someone else could hear it. I nodded and turned to look at Sophia. She was still looking around at the trees. Well, it didn't feel like anything was watching us, but I knew the way she was flashing the torch all over the place, it was bound to catch the creature's attention. Still, she walked across the gravel and gave me a friendly smile when she finally did look at me. It felt almost faked or forced. Andrew dropped us off at the cabin, and I could see his pace had picked up now that he was alone. We quickly waved goodbye as I saw him taking something out of his bag, maybe a knife. "Wow, this place is so cozy," Sophia evaluated as she stepped into the cabin and looked around. She checked every room and then the monitors. "Yeah, well, I advise we just stay in the security room and only visit the bathroom when we need it," I quickly replied while putting my bag down slowly, as to not make a sound from the items inside. "So we have to check the monitors if anyone tries to sneak in or if any animal gets too close." I spent the first hour explaining how the job worked and checked texts from Harley and Andrew. We agreed I'd tell her about the creature when she settled in, and then we could try to hunt off or scare away the creature if it did approach. I pulled out my personal camera monitor. It could only display one screen and I'd have to switch in between the cameras. Sophia hadn't brought much with her, just snacks and a torch. I was about to speak when I got a text notification. I opened my phone. It was from Andrew. "Oh, I think I hear it outside. It's making a creaking sound." Deciding to tell Sophia later, I switched the handheld monitor to check the base of the watchtower. Sure enough, I saw the creature. It looked even more twisted than last time, as if its spine was folding in on itself, trying to shrink into a more human height. The sight of it cracking its posture rose a sickening feeling in my stomach. I replied while also looking at Sophia. She seemed to be fixed on the monitors and eating a snack. "Yeah, it's at the base of the stairs. Do you have a weapon?" The creature continued to contort itself, till I would have almost mistaken it for a tall man with some kind of back issue. "Damn it. Yeah, I have a knife." "Okay, don't do anything. I don't think it's trying to climb the stairs." I continued to monitor the creature. "Hey, Sophia." I finally remembered what the text had distracted me from. "Yeah?" It sounded like her cheek was full of something. Would you believe me if I told you there's a creature in the forest?" Sophia stopped chewing and turned to look at me. "Why?" Her joyful tone had melted away. "Well, at night this pale creature comes looking for campers and us night guards. Me and the others have this plan to deal with it, but..." She cut me off by slamming her snack bag onto the desk. "I know what you're trying, Robin." She stood up from the chair and looked at me with a hurtful expression. "What?" I didn't have the words. "Don't think I didn't notice the weapons you and the others are carrying, and the, you're going to deal with her, right, comment. You guys are just trying to find the right opportunity to kidnap me. I know about the night guards going missing here. It's because of you, isn't it?" She picked up her bag and I tried to get up. "It's not like that. Look, just listen to me. I'm not lying. That thing's dangerous." I slowly walked towards her, but she pulled out a small pocket knife. "To think, you were going to lure me to some safe hiding spot in the woods to hide from a creature. Get away from me." She threatened me with her knife and walked towards the door. Before I could say anything, she opened it and ran off into the dark. She slipped on her bag and used the torch to guide her through the trees. I watched her from inside the cabin, trying not to yell. I closed the door, locked it, and grabbed the radio. I also noticed that Sophia's radio was gone, and she most likely took it in her bag. I called into the others and informed them of Sophia being out there alone. They both cursed, and we panicked as we thought about what to do. I checked the cameras, and the creature had disappeared from the base of the watchtower. I bit my lip and took my bag, determined to find Sophia before something else did. I checked the camera outside the cabin. Nothing. Taking a deep breath and turning on the torch, I walked out, looking around wearily before stepping outside. I jogged into the woods, the radio still hanging on my bag. I'd mounted the flare gun on my belt, holding the torch in one hand and a baseball bat in the other. It felt horrible running through the woods while I knew the creature was out there somewhere. My paranoia sent my heart racing as I felt my breath catch at every sound around me. In the distance, I heard a scream as I received a text. "I'm going out too," Andrew informed me. I continued to run towards the sound of the scream, hoping dearly it was Sophia just panicking at some animal. And that's when I felt it, that paralyzing spike that struck through my whole body. Something was watching me. I spun around and aimed the torch at all angles, my heart reaching my throat. I paused, the light finally hitting something. 2 golden eyes looked back, just above eye level. My hand trembled as I stood there, frozen in place by fear. The creature had found me, and this time there was nowhere to hide. We stayed there for what felt like 5 minutes, but was more likely 1, until it made a screaming sound, like a corrupted version of Sophia's. I turned and sprinted, using the torch to light the ground. I could hear the footsteps of the creature behind me. My eyes whirled as I saw the trees passing by, my legs running on adrenaline. I hated that I could hear it. It was catching up. No longer screaming. I knew I couldn't outrun it, and I had no idea of where I was going, so I decided to confront the creature. I turned around and swung my bat as hard as I could. It just missed the creature, but caused it to jump back. If I'd waited a second longer to turn around, I was terrified to think what it would have done if it had caught me. I finally got a proper look at it. It looked like a twisted, taller version of Andrew, mimicking his jacket, jeans, shirt, and boots. But his face was contorted and inhuman. Its eyes looked brown, but reflected gold from the torch's light. Its hands were long, sharp, and crooked, making it look like a nightmare version of Andrew. My hand trembled as I readied to swing again. The tears in my eyes welling up, slightly blurring my vision, the radio in my pocket, emitting static noise before Andrew's voice spoke through it. Robin, where are you? Are you okay?" My stomach felt completely twisted as I saw the face of the creature crack its jaw back and forth, looking more and more human each time it was replaced. It opened its mouth and twitched slightly as it spoke. "Robin, where are you? Are you okay?" It tried to echo back. Its back cracked slightly as its height decreased again. "Where are you, Robin? Are you okay? Where are you?" My lip whimpered as I heard it continue to correct the mimic, sounding more and more like Andrew. His facial features also twisted around to look more and more human. "Get away from me, you freak!" I screamed and swung again for it. I felt a crunching sound as the bat hit, as if the bones were moving around inside of it and were delicate. I let out a scream as I felt something shove me away. I fell onto my back as the force was too much for me. I took the flare gun from my belt and tried to aim at it, my hand shaking from the desperation. "Eat shit, bitch," I spoke under my breath as I fired the flare into its face. It let out another horrible scream as it grabbed its eye and backed away, running into the darkness, the flare scorching its face. As I waited there in the dark, replacing the flare in the gun with my last bullet, I finally got up and felt the pain in my side from the fall. I coughed and picked up my items. I took the radio and called in. "Harley, what happened? I think I scared it off." As soon as I finished, I got a response. "Oh, thank God. Thank God you're okay. I was so scared because it sounds like Andrew's radio's broken. He won't text me back and I can't get anything back from Sophia except for some panic earlier. What if it got them? You need to come to the office right now," she begged. I could hear she was on the verge of tears. I got up and started towards her direction, looking for the fence. I eventually found it and followed it to the main gate. Harley came out and gave me a big hug. I confirmed it was her when she told me an old joke from text. We waited there, in the office, trying to desperately get in contact with the others. I checked my cameras over and over. Nothing. We continued till the sun rose, and even then, nothing. Resentfully, we agreed to go looking for them once the morning shift arrived. I walked through the forest alone. Me and Harley agreed it was better to split up. I looked around and called out for Andrew and Sophia, hoping against all odds that by some miracle they might have gotten away. "Robin," I heard a soft, whimpering voice approach me. I turned and saw Sophia with tears in her eyes. "Robin." She walked over to me and hugged me. I hugged her back as questions arose. "What happened? Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just, I saw the creature. It was about to attack me before Andrew arrived and tried to fight it off. Oh, I was too scared, Robin. I just was too scared and I ran away. It got him." The tears rose in her eyes and she cried more. It's okay, Sophia. Just take a deep breath. Look, you can just walk out of this park and you never have to come back again. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you earlier, or that I scared you. I should have told you about the creature as soon as you arrived, but I just didn't trust you to take it seriously." She nodded and walked away, heading straight for the gate. As I walked back with her and saw her turn the street down the road, I heard Harley walk up from behind me, from the park. "You're not going to believe it. I mean, it was good, but it was bad too." I turned around, and what Harley said next has haunted me since. "I just met Andrew. He told me the creature got Sophia, but he was okay. He left and, well, I don't think he's coming back." Since then, I've continued to work at the park, but I've never seen the creature again. It got out, and now walks through the streets, hiding as anyone and anywhere. I talked to a minimal number of people, only trusting the people I knew before that job. Both Andrew and Sophia disappeared without a trace. The police couldn't find them, they just vanished. Well, I'm convinced now that my stubbornness to tell Sophia the truth too late was what led to this. Anyone around me could be the creature. I jump at every sound in the night, every unexpected person around the corner, and every bush shake or branch creak. My mind's been haunted from that day on as I continue to pray that one day, maybe one day, I'll see those golden eyes on the security cameras again. And so once again, we reach the end of tonight's podcast. My thanks as always to the authors of those wonderful stories, and to you for taking the time to listen. Now, I'd ask one small favor of you. Wherever you get your podcast from, please write a few nice words and leave a 5-star review, as it really helps the podcast. That's it for this week, but I'll be back again same time, same place, and I do so hope you'll join me once more. Until next time, sweet dreams and bye-bye.